to everyone on the call this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us on this inspiration session called Beyond the Trolls, Recognizing and Responding to Online Harassment Against Journalists. This is a very timely topic as journalists are facing harassment across the world due to the important work that they do. This is a topic that we really deeply care about at RNW Media, and we've done a great body of work from research to trainings and so on dealing with this issue. And we'll be talking about this more and more as we go along. My name is Moseti Nyamwange. I am the Regional Manager of Sub-Saharan Africa Projects and Partnerships at RNW Media. Now, since the pandemic, most of you have attended hundreds, if not thousands, of webinars. So I'll not repeat the same Zoom rules that we hear at the beginning of each webinar. Please keep them and keep them in mind. However, need to note that we do have live interpretation available for French-speaking people. To access it, please go on your Zoom toolbar and click the globe icon and choose French to listen in French. Now, if you have any questions or thoughts or points that you'd like to raise, please drop them on the chat function or on the Q&A function here on Zoom. We'll do our best to respond to them on the Q&A function or during the open discussion when we get to engage with you. Now, this is the second inspiration session that we are undertaking in our digital media leadership series. We had our first one in October on budgeting for a future crisis that spoke really about media viability and how media makers need to think about their finances. Now, this is the second one where we're talking about digital security and looking at online harassment against journalists. And we'll be looking at some of the solutions that we can actually implement to respond to this online harassment threats. Next, we shall be focusing on digital media leadership. This is one that will be happening on the 27th of November. And we'll have one on strategic AI deployment in newsrooms on the 2nd of December. Please join us for this. Now, for today, I am joined by two very wonderful experts who have a wealth of expertise and experience on the topic that we're going to discuss today on recognizing and responding to online harassment. Now, first up, we have Gilo, who is Belgium-based, just a couple of hours away from me. He's an information security expert and trainer based in Belgium. And he has coached many NGOs and activists in many regions on information and security and privacy projects. Thank you very much for joining us, Gilo. I'll give you a moment to just introduce yourself and tell the people here the kind of expertise you have on this topic.
Thank you very much, Sam. And thanks to RNW for inviting me to this webinar. As Sam said, I collaborate with a number of NGOs on digital security and privacy issues, mostly as a trainer. I did trainings also in Africa a few times myself and to journalists, so I'm very excited to be in this conversation. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gilo. And next, I have Zubeida Kananu. And then this is a special introduction because Zubeida and me come from the same country. Zubeida is a media leader, a broadcast journalist. She is the president of Kenya Editors Guild, and she is a trainer and advocate for media freedom. Zubeida, hello. Can you hear us?
Oh, hi, Museti. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Your video is a bit choppy, but it's fine. We can hear you well. No, that's totally fine. Could you please introduce yourself for the people on the call? I think we lost her. Zubeida, can you hear us?
Sorry. Thank you so much. I'm really, truly humbled to be here this afternoon. I can hear you.
All right, we'll give.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead with your introduction, please.
Museti, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm sorry about the network. We're expecting to have the State of the Nation address anytime from now, 1 hour from now. Maybe that could be the problem. As you rightly put it, my name is Zubeida Kananu. I'm the president of Kenya Editors Guild. Yes, and one of the victims of social harassment. So other than joining you as a speaker, I'm looking forward to being coached by Gilo as well, because sometimes when you're trolled, when you're harassed, when you're silenced online, we never know how to react. We never know what to do. So basically, I'm here to learn as well, as I engage the other delegates on the call.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We're here to learn from you as well. And now at RNW Media, of course, we see this as a very important topic, but also very pertinent to digital media leaders. And this particular inspiration session builds up to our digital media leadership course that will be offered next year as part of our RNTC on tour initiative. And we'll be coming for a second time to Kenya. So this is very exciting for me as a person, as a Kenyan. But then let's get right into it to understand really online harassment. What are these early warning signs that journalists face? What are the patterns of harassment that exist and so on? So first of all, let me ask you, Zubeida, what kind of harassment or technology facilitated harassment do you see journalists facing in your field, the kind of colleagues that you have? What online harassment do you see journalists facing?
You know, online harassment, or what we refer to as online GBV, is a new thing to us. So when it first happened, we never we never knew how to react to it. We never knew that we were being harassed, you know, because people are used to physical harassment. And we've looked at UNESCO, Media Council of Kenya. More than 70% of female journalists have been harassed, have been trolled, have been called names, have been shamed online. But more than 60% of these cases have gone unreported, because many of us feel like even if you report it, nothing will be done about is being silent followers online. When someone belittles you online, sometimes you hide in silence and not do anything about it. I, for example, being a leader, sometimes when you're vocal online, many people online will want to silence you so that you don't keep talking, so that you don't speak out, you know. I remember during the protests in Kenya last year, I was in the newsroom one day getting ready to go for my evening bulletin. And then I started receiving calls out of nowhere, calls in thousands, you know, WhatsApp messages, you know, text messages from unfamiliar people, numbers, you know. I didn't know what was happening until I got a few texts saying, "Oh, hi, we're here to say hi to you." Date, I don't know who posted my number online. What their intention was. So for
All right, Zubeida, we can't hear you really well. Could you turn off your camera? Maybe that will be helpful with the sound.
I could not even use my number. Every time someone tried to call me.
Okay, I think that's a bit better. Can you, testing 1, 2, can you talk for just a moment?
I'm honestly so sorry. I think network has been tampered with. Is it okay?
Yeah, I think the audio is now much better. So could you just, so that, because I think there was a wealth of knowledge in the response that you were giving, I could hear it in bits and pieces, but I have the upper hand or the advantage of knowing this from you. So could you just repeat for the audience that we have?
So just saying, giving statistics of the number of more than 70% of journalists have confessed through data that was released by Media Council of Kenya. So many journalists, more than 70%, I being one of them, confessed to having been trolled or bullied online. And many of us have never reported. So many of these cases go unreported because sometimes we feel like, one, we don't know who the perpetrators are, because most of the time these people that are involved use pseudo accounts or fake accounts, to troll journalists in Kenya. Sometimes we tell ourselves, even if you report, nothing will be done about it. So sometimes we just follow, we end up being silent online followers. We are afraid of posting anything online because of the fear of being targeted. So platforms, because you feel it's where nobody knows you, nobody follows you, nobody trolls you, nobody calls you names, because sometimes it gets to a point where you're traumatized. Mental illness has become a major issue among female journalists in Kenya because of what they go through online. Because when they target you, they don't just target you, they bring in your kids, they bring in your spouses, they bring in your families, because that they know that's where they get you the most, So that's why many journalists, other than exiting the digital platforms, many of them follow silently, they don't comment, they don't post anything. For me, when I was trolled, when my number was shared online, or when fake blogs were posted or shared online about me, I went for about 3 months without reading comments, because I was avoiding the toxicity that came with it. So I went for several months without posting, without reading comments online. And to date, I don't open blogs. So I blocked so many bloggers, those that I knew. And whenever someone shares a blog about me, I don't read it. I don't open it. Even if you shared a blog with me right now, I would not open it. And
I think that's, Zubaida, I think that's very important, because with the context of Kenya, and again, I have the advantage of knowing it, Kenyans actually ran out a whole sitting president out of Twitter. And the president,
yes.
President Uhuru Kenyatta came out and said, I don't want to read that anymore because of my mental health. So if people can run a whole president out, what about just a journalist? And I like that you had, or rather took the aspect of talking about a lot about female journalists as well, because we know that online harassment happens across board to all genders, but then it is specifically also targeted, or rather more of it is also targeted to female journalists. And interestingly, we've just celebrated the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, and the theme this year was raising awareness on AI-facilitated GBV against women journalists. So what kind of narratives can you tell us that you see when you're being trolled or doxxed? What narratives are they pushing when someone, or rather when blogs are being written about you, when people are reaching out to you? What kind of messages are they sending to you?
What's the objective? Women, female journalists. Post has nothing to do with your profession, has nothing to do what you do. And in post, let's say, a headline from the newspaper, people turn that to, target you as an individual, and not, it has nothing, it's not even related to what you've posted. Or when you call out a leader, on corruption or something that they've done, the people that are in their circles end up curating fake information about you just to bring you down, just to silence you, so that you don't call them out, so that you don't do what you do as a journalist, or what you're mandated to do as a journalist. So I wouldn't want to get into details, but some of the blogs that have been shared online, honestly, I would even be embarrassed to talk about it, because, some people write blogs accusing you of breaking things and not marriage or whatever. They just end up sexualizing that as a woman, So it never has anything to do with what you do as a journalist. They just want to create fear in you. The intention is just to silence you, to ensure that you don't speak. And that is what has been done. Because I remember back a few years, about 10 years ago, there's a photo I posted online, and some bloggers picked it and used it to curate fake information, claiming that I was dating that person that posted, or every time. So right now, I'm very careful about what I post, or what I post online, or how I caption that photo, because every time I post, bloggers pick it up and curate fake information, fake stories about it, because they just want clicks or likes. So, and I was talking about my number being shared online during the Gen Z-led protests. To date, I don't know why my number was posted online, or who posted it. But the intention was to silence me, because during that time, we were very vocal about journalists being harassed by the police or different quarters, including state and state actors during the protest. So we were very vocal online. So I think the intention was to silence me, but honestly, I think by now I've developed thick skin. I don't care anymore what people write or what they say about me, so long as what I am doing is right and my conscience is clear. So I don't care about what they write anymore.
No, thank you so much for that. And I think you already get into talking to us a bit about the impact that some of this things that are being done to journalists actually face, and the things that journalists would take, things like self-censorship to self-censor what they post online, but then also the logic behind harassment, which sometimes is mainly clickbait. And Jill, I want to come and bring you into the conversation at this point and ask you, you've been working with many NGOs, many activists and journalists as well. What kind of impact do you see, and especially psychological or professional rather, what kind of impact do you see online harassment has on the person that is being harassed?
Well, I think, thanks, Sam, and by the way, thanks, Zubeda, for your stories, and I'm sure that there are nightmare stories that you and other journalists can share, unfortunately. I want to, first of all, stress that there is definitely a disproportionate impact on women here, because what has been happening is that attackers usually weaponize gender in this kind of attacks, and they do, of course, body shaming, sexualized threats, and in particular with professional journalists, they target the credibility of their credibility and their professional competence. Also, I've read the research Zubeda mentioned, where more than 70% of female journalists actually experienced online violence. But I also like to stress that of these type of online violence, 20% of these attacks escalated to offline violence as well. So let's not reduce this threat to something that only happens online, because it can have big consequences. And that's one of when you say, oh, what do you see, the impact, right? This is clearly for me the biggest impact. Of course, harassed online is a horrible thing, but knowing that there is the possibility that it escalates to an offline violence is, of course, even worse. I think we have to understand also what is online harassment, because unfortunately, as it is, the internet allows everybody to give comments. And among the comments, there will always be some negative comments, but it's part of the game. And if it is limited thing, then there shouldn't be any impact. We accept the possibility of interacting with the public, so there will be. However, if there is a sort of coordinated campaign on online harassment, then I think this is a moment where there would be like a stronger impact on people. We have to understand that some of these things are actually coordinated. Some of these campaigns are well organized. It can be different actors. It can be state actors. it can be competitors, it can be just people going after women, which is unfortunately horrible. And this is because we also have to figure out how this is happening. And there are, of course, first of all, try to understand what are the red flags there. Like, if you want to understand completely how it is. And this is because I have to come from my side as a trainer. One of the first things I tell people is try to understand the patterns that are actually happening. And for those who haven't experienced it, it's important to check if, for example, there is a sudden raise in mentions of the person. If it's happening across platforms, like it's not just on the blogs, but it happens on different social media. If there is, like what Zubeida said, the appearance of personal information, like a phone number somewhere, maybe something that we didn't share, like publicly, but somehow people got hold of, which, by the way, with a proper, unfortunate doxing activity. There are doxing tools. For those of you who don't know what doxing is, it means making a deep research about someone. Then there are tools these days that actually allow all the types of personal information to come out. So if it's something that is actually coordinated, then there is the usage of these tools, and then also private personal informations can be published, and then that is definitely a red flag that can be considered harassment. This, as we were mentioning, has first of all an element not only, of course, of surprise, but for many as an element of trauma, because I always consider security from a holistic perspective. Is not just digital security for me. It is the combination of digital security, physical security, and psychosocial security. And if someone is heavily under stress, they cannot react because it's natural. Like if I'm under stress, I'm concerned for me and my family, because as Zubeida said, this actually involves also the families, unfortunately, and the people close to us. Then I am not capable of thinking about protecting my digital thing. My concern is at the moment is completely different. So I want to stress the fact that even if this is happening, let's say in the digital realm, can have strong consequences offline, both in physical terms, but also in terms of trauma for the victims. There are people who are stronger in reacting to this, but I do not want people to expect everybody to have the same strength.
All right. Thanks, Gillo, for giving us. I think I was just taking notes, and you've given us very key things to think about when people are facing online harassment, the things, the markers that show that this is now harassment. But then you've also given us a very good understanding of what kind of impact that creates and how it creeps into the offline violence. In fact, at RNW Media, we've just conducted research with women media makers in the MENA region. And this also came out a lot, that online violence very much, in very many cases, translates to offline violence, and people actually find these people and become violent with these women. Now, I would like to move on to the topic of digital hygiene, because we don't want to just spend the whole hour to talk about problems, but we also want to talk about what are some of the practical things that journalists can do, but then further, what are some of the things that digital media leaders that have journalists under their wings need to do to actually safeguard the journalists, but also safeguard the data and identity of this individual personas online. So, Gillo, coming back to you again, what are some of the core practices that we should undertake to ensure our safety online?
Yeah, we cannot, of course, tell people to disappear and not have an online presence, especially if you are a journalist, you are a public figure. So many people I know, they say, oh no, let's not be present, but that's unfortunately not the solution. There should be proactive doxing prevention, if you want. So we should teach more journalists to dox themselves and see where their presence is online, to do things like, for example, reverse image search on their photos to see if they are appearing online. And in terms of pure digital tools, if you want, first of all, try to understand what are the opt-out procedures from many of these services, like privacy tools that platforms provide. Because unfortunately, let's say, if you want to present on social media, there are privacy features for each of the social media that use privacy settings that you can use, but they are hidden, unfortunately. So, and they differ from tool to tool. But so privacy settings, super important. There are some basic digital security measures and stuff like password security, which is definitely non-negotiable. And this is to avoid the account takeover mixed with the two-factor authentication. So the possibility to not just have a password, but also to have another piece of information that protects your account. Also, super important for me is to actually have what I call account compartmentalization. So separate professional and personal digital identities. So journalists, in my opinion, should always have distinct online personas with different email addresses, different phone numbers. This is a prevention. I know that it's the problem with the compartmentalization is that it requires more effort. It requires to have your own private stuff and another private email. And it's difficult to end up in a situation where, okay, we put everything in one basket, but then you are it's easier to be a target if you have something like that. And of course, try to do a bit of what I call social media lockdown, which is, for example, limit the tagging, limit the being tagged on photos, restrict who can see you. And I know that there is always the tendency of having more and more contacts like everywhere, and somehow it's a race of popularity at a certain point. But the problem is that the more people we have in our network, even if they are not our friends or our contacts or our colleagues, then the more we are exposed. So we have to review always our social media presence and really it's very unfortunate, of course, that we have to be careful on how we present ourselves. But I think the compartmentalization, already having different identities, not different identities, but actually separate the professional one to the personal, is something very useful. Because a professional profile, you should make it public, no problem. A private profile, you know that only your friends, your family can actually have access to that. So
and that's that's very interesting. And I want to bring Zubeida in. No, actually, she's okay. Let's give it a moment because there she is. She's back. You have rightly spoken about some of the advantages of account compartmentalization, but some of the negative things or some of the the other downsides of the things that they could potentially face. Zubeida, can you hear us? And I would like to bring you to talk about what is the practicality of this account compartmentalization. Can you actually succeed to separate the online versus rather the professional versus personal spaces? Zubeida?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you
Awesome. Yes, we can.
hear me?
Yeah.
You can separate the two. You can separate your personal and professional work. And that's why we encourage our colleagues, whenever you have to be very careful about the kind of information that you share online on a personal level or as a profession. Because I remember back, was it 2 years ago in the newsroom, our leadership came up with a policy that dictated how we personal web pages. where we were told we can only accounts and not post directly on our social platforms, on our individual social media platforms. So they encouraged us to only retweet what, I will use the example of KTN, what KTN has posted, other than me as Zubeida posting on behalf of KTN on my social media account, because today I'm posting about my family, post about the president. So it's a bit conflicting. And, I forgot to mention this earlier. Many newsrooms in Kenya, times politicians, because we are the ones on the limelight, target us to fight their own individual wars, political wars, political fights. Because I work for a media house that has taken this political inclination. So the other side of the political divide targets me because of what happened. They are not in support with so as to settle their political fights. So we were encouraged to avoid posting work-related information on our individual platforms, because sometimes you can also post something that will put you in trouble, because sometimes for example, as Zubeida, if I post something, people will think that's the position of Kenya Editors Guild. They don't remember that I'm posting that as an individual. So that's where we encourage to be very careful what we post on our social media platforms, because and I'll use an example of a cabinet secretary who about 2 years ago posted something using his personal account, but he was attacking journalists. He was targeting a certain media house in Kenya. He posted that media house is a brothel. All the staff that work there are prostitutes. And when we called him out, many came to his defense, saying that he posted on his individual capacity. But when you are a leader, when you are in the limelight, when you are a public officer or a public figure, sometimes people see what you are, that position that you hold, even before they see you as an individual. So that's why we encourage to separate the two. So be careful what you post, because whenever you post something, people will see you as that leader or as that public figure. They will not remember that you're posting on an individual capacity. So we encourage our journalists to be very, very super careful and to separate the two, especially those of us who are in the limelight, because that's how people end up targeting you, because you become the easier target, because they cannot reach your leadership. They target you as an individual, and they feel that they've achieved what they intended by silencing you, by ensuring that you don't post more stuff about, or you don't call them out on social media platforms. So, and that's why we've seen these cases escalate, particularly during political events. When there's something political happening, that's when we see many journalists being targeted. As I mentioned earlier, most of the cases that were reported last year and this year were during the Gen Z-led protests. That's when we saw many journalists being targeted online. When it's a political season, when it's an electoral season, we see journalists being targeted most of the time by different quarters, political quarters, by politicians, by different individuals in leadership. So, but when it's not political, when political events are not heightened, or they are not at the peak, we see the cases going down. But the last 2 years, because of the protest, because of even the by-election that is going on right now, we've seen many journalists being targeted online.
All right, thank you for bringing out. I think I like the point that you bring out about the double standard that is applied to men versus women, because you talk about this politician who is a man who posts that this media outlet is a brothel, but then people can apply that double standard and say, hey, this is a personal post, this is not a professional post. But then many people will not apply that standard to you when you post something that is a personal view, and that is interesting. And thank you for also highlighting that media leaders and media outlets, or within their leadership, they can put together policies that actually guide journalists how they can fight back, or rather how they can prepare to not be attacked, rather. We have spoken about the things that we can do pre-attack. And I want to come back to Gilo and talk about the things that happen during an attack and after an attack. What are some of the things that journalists should do just before or rather during the attack and after an attack? What does that process look like?
Yeah, sure. Like in all the incidents, the best thing to do is to have a response protocol. This is something you have to start with, something like a checklist that can be done literally in the first 48 hours after an attack. First of all is stop engaging with the harassers. Like, do not reply. There is unfortunately an emotional response from the side of the victims, of course, to respond. But the more we engage in the discussion with them, the more you actually are fueling the fire. Document everything, like before it disappears, because many attackers, many trolls, they do the attacks and then they delete their posts. So it's important to document everything. Secure, of course, also all the accounts that you have. Definitely the one where you've been attacked, but also all the others to make sure that your accounts are not being taken over. I always am a supporter of what I call a support network, which is colleagues, family, and alert them, say, I am being harassed. So being very careful to communicate this to the others. Because of what we mentioned before, also assess if there are physical safety risks there. If someone mentions your location, is there a possibility that someone is actually going to harass you offline? So there is this element of collecting evidence, which is important because if you want to report these, and I hear, Zubeida, that sometimes we report these things and people don't, like companies, don't really react. Unfortunately, that's how it happens, but I have a suggestion on that. It's important to collect evidence by taking screenshots, sender information, timestamps, addresses, everything. Also try to understand, to find out more about the profile of the attackers, if possible, like usernames and the follower counts and this kind of things, which can be found on their social media. So make a sort of logs, of course, of all the records, of the chronological record of this. And what is important is eventually is some reporting mechanism to the platforms. Like all of the social media platforms and blogs platforms, they have different report harassment procedures. What's happening is that unfortunately, many times it's true, they do not respond, and or they're very slow in responding. So my suggestion here is to use services like Access Now Helpline or Frontline Defenders. These are two groups that are known to be collaborating with the human rights defenders and journalists. They are in direct touch with these companies like Facebook, Instagram, Google. And if you report, if you had an incident and you have all this evidence that you collected, you can talk to them if the company is not responding, and they will support you in reporting mechanisms.
Interesting. Zubeida, let me bring you here because Gilo has given us some practical steps that journalists need to take. But then when you're actually on that end of the line, it's an emotionally charged period. It's a period where you really feel like you want to fight back. Do these things make sense as steps that you should practically follow? And as a person who has actually gone through online harassment, are these some of the things that you would undertake?
Absolutely. And I think I've used personally the experience that I've gone through online to look for solutions for my fellow journalists. because for the last couple of years, we've partnered with different digital or the tech companies. We've worked with TikTok, we've worked with Google, we've worked with Facebook, all these tech companies to offer training to our journalists. And that has been the case even for the annual convention that we host every year. This has remained to be our topic of discussion. Like, other than the challenges that we're facing, what are the possible solutions? And we bring on board the tech companies to guide us through. And I am happy that Gilo has spoken about the red flags. How do you identify the red flags, and what do you need to do? What are the security measures you need to take as an individual when you're engaging on social media platforms? So that is one. We've really been keen on partnering with the digital platforms. We also give them feedback on the gaps, existing gaps. And this is the last conversation that we had with TikTok, for example, where we focused on online harassment against female journalists. So we looked at the red flags, what could be what the gaps, existing gaps are, and how to seal those gaps. So we've had this conversation where we're looking for solutions together, us as journalists plus the tech companies, because we are the victims, they are the ones with the solutions. So how do we bring together our forces to find solutions to our challenges? And also something else that we've been doing, and something that Gilo has spoken about, is improving on the reporting mechanisms, because we noted that they don't exist, especially in our newsrooms. So when a journalist is targeted, or when the media house is targeted, what are the reporting channels, if at all they exist? But we noted that they are not there. So we encouraged newsrooms to put in place reporting mechanisms where when someone is targeted, this is how you report, this is to who you report, and also online policies, putting in place online policies, because we noted that many newsrooms don't have them in place, on how you use social media platform, what we post, what you don't expose that might put you in danger or might expose you as a journalist. So we've really encouraged newsrooms to put in place online or digital policies for their journalists. And also we mentioned the issue of training. We've been keen on training journalists on online harassment and what to do and what not to do. And then the other thing that we've been keen on that Gilo has spoken about is collaboration and partnering with security, the security sector. We've partnered with the police, we've partnered with different government entities, to ensure that they offer protection to journalists, and also judiciary to expedite the cases that we file. Because it's very unfortunate that many cases that have been reported by journalists go unresolved. And I don't know why nobody takes journalists seriously, whether it's an online harassment or online attack or physical attack. Nobody takes these cases seriously. That's why 1 year down the line, we're still talking about the journalist that was shot at by the police. These cases have been reported, but nobody seems to take them seriously. The other day, the Parliament initiated the process of reviewing the Online Harassment, Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. Currently, there's a case because there are sections of that law that people were not happy with. But what we feel is that, yes, we have amazing laws as Kenya, particularly on social media, or on digital platforms. But the challenge is enforcement, because you will find many people violating the law, but nothing is done. And that's why they're using that weakness to keep harassing people and targeting people online. So we are really keen on encouraging and working with the government to ensure that the existing laws are enforced, that the perpetrators are held to book, because that has been a major challenge. And that's why many journalists feel discouraged to report. Yes, you have the evidence, and the people that are harassing you, the people that are calling you out, the people that are calling your names are known to everyone. But when you report, these cases go unresolved at all. Because I'll go back to the CS and the things that he posted online. Top leadership in government came to his defense, saying, if we don't protect ourselves from the media, who will protect us. So every time people look at journalists as the enemy, and that's why I see us as a very lonely profession, because nobody speaks for us. Nobody comes to our defense. And that's why they'll sweep under the carpet some of the cases that we report, some of the issues that we raise. But we keep advocating, and we keep, and we end up using even social media platforms and partnering with the civil society to call out those who are involved, But now when you do that, you end up being the target online by those we call keyboard warriors. You end up being the enemy. You end up being targeted online. And when that happens, nobody listens to you, even when you cry out. So many of us have either put, and I'm happy Gilo brought that up. Sometimes you limit the number of people that can tag you, or sometimes if you're posting something, if it's an investigative piece, you switch off the comment section so that nobody comments, on it. Or you, as I do, you ignore, what they say, or you don't read the comments at all. So
let's talk about.
I've seen it work for me sometimes.
Yeah. I want to stay with you for just 1 minute and invite you to talk about the mental health support, because at the time you're being harassed, it's a very harrowing period for you as a person. So where do you seek emotional or mental health support?
That has been the biggest challenge. So you cry yourself in your house. I've been traumatized, let me confess.
Yeah.
I've been traumatized for so long, because sometimes you see the things that they post online and you can tell clearly that they're not factual. But as they say, fake news spreads faster around the world before the truth puts on its shoes. So sometimes, even by the time you come to defend yourself, fake news has spread everywhere. And because you're the one in the limelight, people tend to believe what is being said. So that affects us emotionally. And I'll speak for me. And I mentioned that it got to a point where I went for months without opening my social media accounts or platforms or engaging anyone on social media. Sometimes it felt that it got to a point where I was almost giving, but with the role that I hold, I have to keep engaging people on all platforms, both online and offline. So sometimes you're forced to be there in as much as you're traumatized, in as much as your mental state is not the right place. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do. But we've reached out to different psychologists and sociologists that offer services pro bono, and we are encouraging newsrooms to set up these offices or to offer these facilities for their staff in-house. It can be very expensive. As mental health is very expensive. So not many reaching out to psychologists, sociologists, psychiatrists that offer these services pro bono, and we hope that we'll be able to get the support that we need. But many of us cry our eyes dry because of the trauma that we go through every day, hoping that one day we'll find a possible solution, a lasting solution.
No, thank you so much for sharing and in a very open way with our community right here. I also just want to note that we've been doing a bit of work to try to understand the mental health and well-being challenges that digital media makers and journalists face in Kenya. And we have a lot of insight from lived experiences, all the systemic challenges and pathways for resilience that journalists and media makers are taking in Kenya. So just inviting people in the community to look out for that research that is coming out in January of 2026. I want to move to the last segment of this conversation and talk about, and Angela, I want to bring you in here because Zubeida has alluded to this throughout the conversation, which was, how do digital media leaders build, safer cultures within newsrooms? And Zubeida has talked about, the policies that can be brought on board for media outlets so that people know what to post and what not to post and so on. So what do you think, the digital media leaders can do to build very safe cultures for their newsrooms?
Well, first of all, there is a lot of responsibility and duties that the newsrooms, the owners of the newsrooms have. And I'm very glad that Zubeida mentioned the mental health support, because if there is actually an investment that a newsroom should do, is with mental health support. It's true that there is a lot of to have proper support in many countries is very expensive, but there are also a lot of NGOs that provide this type of support to human rights defenders. So I really strongly encourage newsroom owners to refer to these resources, and I know that RNW probably you are in touch with many. I think it's important also newsrooms provide legal support, because when you report something, often you need to involve legal, and they should provide the kind of thing. They should provide access to digital security experts, and they should do mandatory digital security trainings. Do refer to groups, again, like Frontline or RNW is in touch with people like me, because we operate only with NGOs and activists. So you are not referring to a company and therefore something being out of reach, basically. Also, is important to give access to tools and services which are affordable, like VPNs or password manager. There are not a lot of resources in this field, so just take advantage of the tools that are available, but they have to support their staff, the newsrooms, and also they are freelancers. Let's not forget that the newsrooms are made by staff, but also by many freelance journalists who also be harassed. So they clearly have, in my view, they have a responsibility, and they have to support them in the best way possible. They also have to create a peer support network where colleagues create this safe environment, and they can always, so that if someone is attacked, they can always refer to. And lastly, I think there should be also some kind of organizational accountability on the side of the newsrooms. The leadership in general should always publicly defend attacked journalists. It's not acceptable if they don't do it. And let's remember that a silence from management also can increase trauma and leads to self-censorship. So management of newsrooms should work on accountability and acknowledge the problems. Ideally, they would designate, for example, an online safety coordinator, for example, within newsrooms, and have, of course, also these digital hygiene, health cycles kind of thing, and moderation policies on the official channels. So I think there's a lot that they can do.
There's a very interesting question on the chat, which I want to ask you, Chilo, which is, someone asks, are there cases where it's worth to actually comment on these lies when someone is being harassed? And do you have to do it yourself, or sometimes is it a good idea to get other people or other groups to react on your behalf so that you're not doing it yourself?
I think the more you expose yourself, the more risks you have that the harassment and the trolling continues. So there are, unfortunately, engaging in any discussion with trolls or harassers will only continue it. The whole thing is to not engage in discussion, block it, report it. And again, you need to have the support of the platforms to be able to properly report it and block it. I also want to stress one thing, that there are cases where individuals are doing these attacks, but there are also cases where there are organized groups. And there are also cases where there are bots, like groups that use bots to do attacks. And these days with AI, it's very easy to do automated harassments with bots, and of course also deepfakes. So there is even more accountability on the side of the platforms on how they accept bots interactions and how they accept deepfake and AI tooling in terms of harassment. If the platform themselves are not responding, it's fantastic that they are close to the journalist, but if they do not respond, again, talk again to groups like RNW, Access, Frontline, because they have a different channel of reporting, and they can probably stop it there.
All right. Thank you very much, Gillo, for that. Zubeida, one last question for you, which is, what is the role of journalists to not only tell their stories of online harassment, but also to promote TFGBV, awareness within broader society? So, some context to this is that RNW Media has been doing a lot of TFGBV reporting workshops for journalists so that journalists can tell stories of technology-facilitated gender-based violence from a rights-based perspective, from a survivor-centered perspective, but also with trauma-informed approaches so that you are ensuring you keep the dignity of these people who have been harassed. So what do you think is the role of journalists to infuse this knowledge within society?
We've launched different policy briefs around GBV, including online GBV, in partnerships with academia, because as Kenya Editors Guild, we work closely with academia for research, and Aga Khan through our partnership with Aga Khan University, we've released several policy briefs around GBV and giving recommendations on what needs to be done. And when we tell these stories, it's one way of sensitizing the public about do's and don'ts, what is right and what is wrong around harassment, even enlightening the public about existing laws around online harassment, and the penalties that come with it. I've hosted one show, means loosely be translated to mean understand the law, where you take the public through different aspects of the law and what the penalty, and then we enlighten or sensitize the public through our platforms on what do's and don'ts, especially when you're using public spaces, for example. And we do a lot of at Kenya Editors Guild. We host town hall conversations where we enlighten the public about the role of media, builds this relationship that we have with the public, because they are our number one audience. How do we improve the relationship that we have with them?
I think we keep losing you again, which is unfortunate, but yeah, we are at the end of the hour.
How do we ensure that the public also protects our space, and respects our... We engage me. Maseti,
Right.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't seem to hear you, but that's fine. We are at the end of the hour and we should be wrapping up. So we'll get that last piece of information from you, and we'll ensure to also package it within the two-pager that we'll package at the end of this session, and also offer it to all the attendees that have been available throughout this session. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and a very big thank you to both Gillo and Zubeida. Unfortunately, we had a bit of technology challenges, but we want to end this at exactly 11:03 because we started at 10:03. Remember that this is part of the many inspiration sessions that we are having. In a couple of days, we'll have on the 27th of November, that's next Thursday, we'll have one more on digital media leadership. And on the 2nd of November, we'll have one more on strategic AI deployment in newsrooms. So please be sure to check out our social media for that. These are all part of the digital media leadership course that will be rolled out in Kenya as part of the RNTC On Tour initiative, which is starting next January to April. For any challenges or for any information for some of the things that you've found interesting, please contact us at RNW Media. And if you ever want to talk about digital media security and safety, please contact us and we'll be able to, lead you to the right pathway, to lead you to some resources that we've created, and so on and so forth. Again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to you, Gilo.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you to Zubeida for being here with us. We will respond to any questions that we've not responded within the 2-pager, and we'll send all these resources via email. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.